You can't just create an open culture overnight and start talking openly about things that you maybe don't know if you can share at work or talk about at work. So I think that's where these strategies come into play.
Amy, we're finally here.
Finally here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, no, thank you for accepting the invitation and coming to our new studio.
It's very cool.
Thank you. Well, Amy, we spoke a couple of days ago, and it was a very interesting conversation. We had a pre-podcast back and forth, you and I, and we said we're going to keep this very conversational, very simple, obviously touching on everything about HR, strategies around HR, mental health, and a lot in between. So, Amy, let's start by who is Amy and what does Amy do?
I'm Amy. Hi. Thanks so much again for having me. So I am head of people at a company called City Relay, which is a property tech business based in London. Predominantly, our team are based in London, but we also have now a remote support team as well, supporting the team internationally. So that has been something that's grown really over the last 2 years. So that's been quite a big shift in our team dynamic and how we kind of all work together as a team. And also, I think giving a consistent platform for everybody or consistent space for everybody to be themselves at work or bring their best selves to work. I think being with people in person, it's probably much easier to get to know them and get to understand kind of where they're at, things that might be going on inside and outside of work for them, and building that rapport face to face. So it has been quite an interesting journey, I think, applying a wellbeing strategy that works for both. And I'd say there are things you can do collectively, but kind of approaching it in a different way and getting to know those remote support team and what they need to kind of do their best work as well, or be the best versions of themselves. So that's been quite interesting and quite a big shift, I think, for us post-pandemic, post-COVID, coming out the back of that and kind of seeing what works and what we're seeing is making a difference to people.
You spoke about change, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
So change, and I think COVID really has changed a lot of things, the way we operate, the way we work. Obviously, a lot of companies have gone fully remote, some are hybrid, some are also somehow getting people back into the office. Mm-hmm. So, but I think the majority of companies are moving into the hybrid situation. Mm-hmm. But just talking about change in general, change management is always a big issue for a lot of companies, especially when you go through dramatic changes, COVID and then post-COVID, how do you operate? And I think what COVID has done also, I don't know what your experience is, but I think COVID has fundamentally changed things forever.
Yeah.
Few things. Mm-hmm. So how do you cope, or how do you, work around that change management within your organization?
So I think something I've learned is change is inevitable. It's always going to be the case. And I think we shouldn't be trying to fight change. We should really try and embrace it. And I think for a lot of people, that's quite a scary concept. We like to stick with what we know. We're humans. We're quite often creatures of habit. So change can be quite daunting and quite scary for a lot of people, right? I think what happened in COVID, I always say change doesn't happen overnight. But I think with COVID, it did. There was a genuine overnight change that was a huge shock to everybody. No one could foresee that. And it did really happen overnight, if you think about it. So I think what then happened is people had no choice to just adapt to that change. We all carried our laptops home and we thought we'd be working from home for a week or 2 weeks. And we adapted. And actually it was quite a different, we quite quickly adapted to having a weekly catch up in the morning remotely, which we'd never done. And it was, I would say, a little bit of a novelty because it just, everyone, and then the 2 weeks turned into 2 months and kind of turned into 2 years. And everybody was impacted in some capacity by that change. For a lot of people, it could have been quite positive. having more time at home, or a lot of people moving closer to loved ones or moving in because they didn't want to stay in London if they were living on their own or whatever. But for I would say for everyone, it had some also negative impact. And I think for a lot of people, it's actually been quite a delayed, people that have built that resilience and embraced that change. It's now the years after where I think things are beginning to catch up with a lot of people. Us as humans, we are built to be resilient. We are built to keep going and be positive and find new ways of working. But I think coupled with that exhaustion of constant change, constant adapting, I think we're seeing the aftermath of it now. And I think we're still having to adapt to that change. And I think people on an individual level are still trying to figure out what works for them. And then you've got that coupled with seeing with businesses. That was a huge overnight shift for businesses that are used to all being in one office space. And I think in terms of work-life balance, it has transformed. It has given, maybe businesses that didn't previously offer flexible working a bit more scope to do so. And it's given people a taste of it. But then on the flip side, you've got some people that still maybe haven't eased into coming back into the office. Some people that still like doing 5 days. Some people that like doing 4 and 1. Some people like doing 3 and 2. How do you navigate that as a landscape? Because again, what's right for one doesn't work for another. And you've got big corporates that are able to have a bit more of a set policy on it, but also still some flexibility on that. You've got smaller businesses that actually really rely on having people together. And that's a big part of how their business operates, having that open communication, collaboration. And then you've got that coupled with getting people to work in the environment that's best for them to be able to do their best work. I mean, how we navigate that, and that's different for individuals and for businesses, right? So I think, what is the answer to that? Really intelligent question. I think it's a bit of trial and error, really, and it's a bit of continuing to navigate change and seeing what works. And I do think that is going to be a continual thing. I don't think it's going to be a quick fix or a quick fix for one business, one person. I think it's about really finding your feet as a business, as an individual, and then navigating it from there. And also maybe decisions will be made for themselves. It might be that some businesses actually get to a point where they're like, it's 4 and 1, non-negotiable. Now, for an individual in said hypothetical business that wants 4 and 1, i.e. 4 days in, 1 day from home, that all of a sudden might not work for that individual for a number of reasons. So it's then up to that individual. Is this environment, is this role, is this situation now serving what I need as a person? So then shifting that to say, if that is what the business needs and wants in this moment, and I'm not able to negotiate a 3 and a 2 or a 2 and a 3 or whatever that is, what does that individual then need to do to move forward with their life that are non-negotiable for them is whatever they need, if that makes sense. So I think you'll see a big shift there as well, because something's got to give here. And I think maybe the onus does sit with the individual to say, actually, what is it that I need? And either a business can accommodate that. Like, I know you have a huge remote team and that works really well for you guys. But actually, there are a lot of people that might also really benefit from actually being in a company, especially maybe quite junior in the career, where they are in the office 4 to 5 days a week and they're learning. I think it really is down to the individual to figure out what it is, what environment they want to be in and what works for them. And then, like I said, either the business can offer that flexibility or it isn't able to at this time, in which case they need to assess their options and do what feels right for them ultimately.
Yeah, I think accountability is important. And I think it is, I completely agree with you. It is a two-sided approach where businesses are also ever evolving and ever changing. Like you said, change is, the only constant. So I think more than fighting the change, it's about the individual then taking that decision. Okay, I've been here for some time now, but now the company's going through a shift whilst my life is going through another direction, another shift. And maybe this is not the right place for me anymore because of this specific reason. And, when you make changes in life, it doesn't necessarily have to be one reason or another. It doesn't have to be necessarily because I don't find meaning for my job anymore or whatever. It's just the dynamics have changed. And based on that, it does not, apply in my day-to-day or my personal life. So, and then you make that change.
And that's where I think you have this crossover with Wellbeing.
Yeah.
Because actually, if there is that fundamental misalignment of what's going on versus what it is that you want or need, that's where I think it can impact your well-being as an individual. And I think for a lot of people, they maybe don't realize that actually, when you actually take a step back and you're like, why am I feeling the way I am? What's going on in my life that maybe is misaligned to who I am as a person, what I want to be doing, where I want to be? And that's where I think this well-being element really comes into it in a way that's so valuable and so powerful to try and create that open dialogue within the organization. In a smaller company, is it easier? Potentially, because there's less people, but you could argue it's harder because actually you know them so well, and you know so much about them, you know them as human beings. So actually it sometimes can be harder because you're supporting them on a different level. If you're in a multinational corporate that's got thousands of people, there is probably less reality that you will know those people on an individual level. So again, you can argue both ways, but I think so important internally, creating whatever environment that you are, creating that open dialogue around, what is it that you need? What is it that you're going through that we can talk about to see that we can support you through it? Or what do you need to do to kind of figure that out? And I don't know if maybe signposting is the correct term to use, but I was thinking about this on the way in. I think for me, it's creating what I found has helped is creating that safe space for people to talk openly about it, and then sort of sending them in a certain direction. What works for one doesn't work for another. But I think a lot of people aren't able to take the time. We're all busy. We're all carrying on. We're all getting on with our lives, and maybe sometimes not taking the time to step back and being like, what is it that I really want or need right now, and what makes sense for me? So I think there is a responsibility on organizations, specifically HR, if possible, and if there's capacity to do so, to support people on their own kind of growth and development journeys, whether or not that is within the current organization that you're in, that you're working with together, or whether or not that's not.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think there's always this term you use in HR, it's appropriate retention. It always sticks with me because when I was quite early on in my career, whenever I had someone hand in their notice, I really felt, it hurt me. I thought, gosh, what have I not, what's happened here? And I felt really quite, upset that person was going to be moving on from the business. Now, over the years, I have learned to let that emotion go and not, but it almost felt like part of my, what could I have done more? Did that person not feel heard or listened to? Did that person feel that they couldn't drive the change they wanted internally to make this role or this business where they wanted it to be? But actually, for a lot of people, it's the right time to move on, and that's okay. And for other people, yes, they did have that experience. It wasn't the right environment for them. And actually, I then over the years began to really kind of embrace and champion that, you can always learn from people that are moving on from the business, but quite often it's the right decision for them at the right time. And I think what's really important is kind of creating that open dialogue as well, that actually moving jobs, moving roles, moving whatever you do, or moving country, whatever you feel is the right thing, that's such a positive conversation to have with your employer that you shouldn't really shy away from. Let's see what we can do to support that and whether or not that could work for the business. But I know that might not work for every business. And again, it's a capacity thing. But I think that's a really great starting point, that people can feel they can share these concerns or worries that might be spinning around in their head, that's going on in their personal life, that actually is impacting their work life, because the two do interlock, don't they? I had a really nice conversation last week with, we've created a management development hub internally at Situile, where we have a core set of managers that we meet every month. And it's become it has become a kind of development platform rather than I kind of initially ran it more as kind of an open forum to celebrate our successes, share our concerns, and then all just come together and be open with how the last month's gone. Quite often it was, yes, it's been a tough month, but it began the vibe began to shift a couple of years ago, and it actually began to be quite a positive, sharing of successes and a support network for each other as managers. Quite a lot of our teams work, as they're quite skill dependent, tend to sometimes work quite siloed, that they're quite specialist in what they do. So I'm trying to create this environment where we all come together as teamers, as managers, to just talk openly. And over the years, it's turned more into, supporting our own kind of personal and professional development. One of the managers last week, he said, I feel so happy I can come to work and I don't have to be like my work self. I can be my whole self. And I was like, I'm so happy you feel that way, because I know people that have a work version of themselves and an outside of work version of themselves. And I know for some professions and some environments, that's the reality. And that's okay. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But for me, that's really important, for myself on an individual level, that I always felt I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to, and I think, again, there are pros and cons to that, because sometimes I think the work and life, therefore, or the work and personal life, can cross over even more. If you do have a work self and a home self, there's a clearer boundary, right? Of, okay, I'm not work anymore, I'm at home. And as well, then with the pandemic, working from home, you then have an even more crossover of. So part of me maybe is a bit like, wow, that's quite cool. You can separate the two. But actually, I think for me and on an individual level, it's so important to, be able to be my whole self at work. So to hear somebody else say that, I thought, wow, that's amazing you shared that. And then so many other people actually shared their experience with it. So kind of a group that ended up, was my idea of just being able to talk openly, ended up being quite a nice conversation and something that, I was really, really happy to hear. But as I said, there's always challenges with that as well, because if you're bringing your whole self to work, how do you then have that life-work separation? But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's, again, you find what works for you. But I thought that was a really, really nice point. And I think, I always say about overnight changes, that doesn't happen overnight. You can't just create an open culture overnight and start talking openly about things that you maybe don't know if you can share at work or talk about at work. So I think that's where these strategies come into play, that they are things you're doing every day internally with the team. You're normalizing these conversations. And, that member of the team was really brave to say that, but actually so many people resonated with it. And I think you just need this, we spoke about it last week, this ripple effect.
Correct.
And I think you need to kind of just stand true to what you feel is right in that moment, and then others will either resonate or not resonate, and then that sends them in a certain direction, and then that has a positive impact on those around them. And I think we said, if you can do that for the 5 closest people around you, those 5 people could then potentially pass that on to the next 5. So,
and then you change the world.
And then we change the world. Exactly. I wanted to share that as an example, as like I said, that group, we've consistently run that meeting for nearly 4 years, and that has built.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So since I joined, probably 3.5, 4 years, that meeting has changed every month. We've built on that meeting, and it will continue to change, because that meeting serves what we need in that moment and what is important and what's relevant. So it does keeps it fresh in a way. But what that has done, my aim was to create an open, no judgment environment.
I love that.
To say what, it stays in the room. Whatever we talk about, it stays in that room, and we take away what we want from it. It means you can have some other conversations of something, let's take that and have a separate meeting. I think it is actually, now I'm thinking and reflecting, it's about building that community.
Yeah, it is.
That's what it is. It's facilitating, and going back to what I was saying about signposting, it's creating an environment where others can then do what they want with it, rather than telling someone to do something a certain way. And I think it's really opened up a lot of really interesting dialogue that maybe wouldn't have happened.
So there's a lot that I try to take from these type of conversations, but then I also try and come to a place where I can take that one thing that I can implement within our own HR strategies as well. So thank you so much for sharing.
So, I felt like I said a lot there.
Yeah,
what was I'd be keen to hear your summary.
Yeah, so what I quite liked, and I think it's absolutely, and I think it's core and fundamental to whatever we do as an organization or as a company, collective, as a team. So that meetups that you've been doing on a weekly basis with the managers, I think that is so fundamental. Something that I will immediately start applying within Plum as well, because so everything starts from your leadership team, and and creating that safe space, brave space, whatever you want to call it. I think that's super important also, because you're also giving them the space to vocalize and then also feel a part of that decision.
Yeah.
And that ripple effect you spoke about as well, that ripple effect has to start from the leadership team. Only then can it trickle down. So I think that's quite interesting, and 100% I will actually feedback that into you.
And I like it. And that's why I think these conversations are so nice, because they do... It does inspire.
Because now that is a ripple effect from you to me now.
This is a live ripple effect, guys.
There you go.
But this is why I think it's so important, to champion this in others, and hopefully anyone that's listening, you will take away from this conversation what resonates with you on an individual level, what you think will work for your business. Because actually, sometimes I really don't think that will work for the environment I'm in. However, it might work if I just did that with these two managers, or whatever that is. I think another dynamic in that, which I actually read something on LinkedIn that just someone posted, which I think a lot of people will be a shared challenge, is hosting a call or a session like that with a blend of in-person and remote, having that dynamic. Because that's another thing we've had to shift and change to. That is the nature of it. As I said, we have a remote support team now. We have people that are based in London but are hybrid. So it was really strange last Thursday when we did our last session. Majority of us were in the office. Now, that doesn't happen a huge amount. We might have maybe out of the group of 15, there might be 5 or 6 of us in the office and the rest out in. So we were piled into our little boardroom. There was, I think, 10 or 11 of us in and 4 online. Now, that was quite a different dynamic to navigate. Usually it was a sort of 50-50 blend. But again, that's another sort of, as I said, at the very beginning of this podcast, navigating that dynamic with the inclusivity of those in-person versus remote. Now, we've got another session coming up at the end of the month where we've got an external facilitator come in, and we had a prep call with him yesterday. And I actually made the decision to make that 100% remote. So he said, I can come into your offices. And I said, that's amazing. But actually, now I think about it, I think the dynamic is best to have us all dial into it. Because actually, otherwise, I think it tips the balance. So again, you'll figure out the dynamic that works for you, your business. I know you guys are mostly remote, so maybe that won't be the case. But then you've also got the argument, it's creating that safe space when you're not all together, which is also a challenge. So again, it's another trial and error. It's another, you'll find your group with what works. But we've started running more kind of remote team socials now. But that is a different dynamic to navigate. And I've invited managers that are based in London that have a remote team. So we've still got that. But again, it's trial and error, as I said, just figuring out. But I think the best way to do it is just to try it. I always, I do a lot of yoga, and I like it when one of my teachers says, we're never going to have this again. And I was like, that is so true, because it's like, you're never going to.
Interesting.
I know.
That's so, oh my God.
I know. She just something so simple. I know. It's just her saying, we will never have the same people in this.
I love that.
Isn't it? And I think even just something so simple, hearing that, again, it makes it quite special and unique. But also then I'm like, God that's so strange. I'm never going to be, and you are never going to be in that moment again. You're never going to do the same class with the same people, with that same group.
That's so profound. Oh my God.
Isn't it so
Such a small thing, but it's so huge.
But you can apply it to the same.
Yeah.
I think is about having the continuity and consistency and structure within that to kind of, let's call it manage the chaos in inverted commas, have that baseline, but know there's going to be chopping and changing.
Yeah.
And actually going back to that consistency piece, it's being consistent. It's a non-negotiable, that meeting around, and you'll work out the duration.
Yeah.
For us, it works really well doing it monthly. They have other checkpoints with, different team meetings and things, but that meeting is a different dynamic once a month. So you might find, like I said, I mentioned earlier in a previous role, when we first went into COVID, we were doing a team meeting every morning, but that was because of the change, and that was bringing that connectiveness together and just talking about work. Whereas this meeting I run is quite a different angle, if that makes sense. So I think it's about staying true to what that hour is, or what that hour represents, or what the agenda of that is. Being inclusive, I think, is super important, and allowing anyone to be involved. And to your point earlier, we want to hear from people. We want to hear different opinions, different ways of working. Because if we are taking this sort of trial and error response, you need to try anything that's going. And if somebody thinks they've got a good idea, absolutely, please bring that to the table and let's talk about it. And I think that is it's making that a norm as well. I think there's a lot of people maybe don't feel confident to suggest something, or feel like, that sounds like a silly idea and everyone's going to laugh at me. Really probably isn't. It probably is a fantastic idea. So go for it. And if it isn't and people don't want to do it, well, that's fine too. You were brave and you gave your suggestion, which then might spark another conversation with someone else, or give them the confidence to suggest something. Again, ripple effect. I think another thing sort of is a little bit in line with the allowing mistakes. But one element of psychological safety that we've really tried to implement is replacing blame with curiosity. I think historically it's quite easy in a very fast-paced, growing, scale-up, startup environment to allocate blame, especially when businesses are structured based on discipline or expertise or knowledge. And sometimes there's a lack of understanding of what another department is doing, or the struggles or the challenges. So again, creating that open dialogue to share challenges, successes, struggles. Quite often they do overlap. But let's replace that blame game with that didn't get done because that department didn't do that, to why, a bit more curiosity around that. What could I have done differently to make sure you had the capacity to do it? Or how could I go about that next time to help you be able to deliver? Or going forward, I really, really, really need this from you guys by this date. Is there anything I could do to remind you earlier? Taking some ownership, responsibility, not blaming, because that just creates, again, that just closes off that open dialogue. And actually, I think that's quite a positive conversation to have. But I think it's so easy to blame. And I think as humans, by default, you want something to blame. You want someone to be annoyed at. Never your fault. We can always take accountability and ownership. Even if we're like 0.1% involved, there's still something you could have done. And I think if we can shift that, again, it contributes to our own well-being, because we ultimately get things done we need to be done.
Oh, for sure.
And I think my final point, I think I've touched on it a few times throughout, is just remembering everyone's human. That we're all human and we're all trying our best, navigating life and the world, and we all want the best for ourselves, each other, the businesses we work for, our careers, our friends, our families. That's a lot to navigate and balance on a daily basis, right? Just remember that everyone's different, everyone deals with things, everyone has different things to deal with, everyone has different things they celebrate, different things that they have to deal with. And just remember that, whatever you can do for somebody to make their life easier, try and do that, and offer that kindness, compassion, and support, really. And it doesn't have to be big things. I always say it's the little things that make such a huge difference to people in their day. And if, going back to the ripple effect, you can do that one thing for somebody else. And it's often, like I said, it's the unseen things. It's not big things. It's not grand gestures. It's just the really small things that will make a difference to that person. And try and be more aware of that, I think. And remember that in any decision, any situation you're in, everyone's doing their best for sure.
I think your last point is so valuable. It's so simple.
So simple.
But in reality, that is what it is.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, we as humans also like to overcomplicate everything that we do, especially in a work environment.
I always say
everything is a strategy. Everything should be by this book or this rule book or whatever. But really, that's what it is. Because ultimately, in an organization, we are just a collective of human beings.
Literally that.
And we're all different. And now we're pushing on this diversity and inclusion and all that. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that of the differences. And we just,
And the reality is, human beings are complex. We are complex beings, right? And I always say this, and I'm really glad you said that. Why do we overcomplicate everything? I mean, I do it. Like, we all do it because we're complicated. We are complicated beings. So therefore, our default is to overcomplicate things. And I feel like I'm on this mission. Like, no. Like, what can we do?
Yeah, just dumb it down.
Literally,
yeah. Like, take it easy.
Break it down. And it's always the simple things. And I feel like I'm on a real mission to simplify life. I don't know the answer.
No, really.
But and it goes back to doing that thing for others. If you can make somebody's life easier for 5 minutes, why would you not do it? It's just to simplify things or help people simplify it or break things down. But that's also is hard. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's actually really hard to simplify complex things. But if you can start on that track of trying to simplify things and stick with the simple things, that's an amazing place to start, because then you can, again, build on more complex things, and you can use simple concepts to solve complex problems. There we go. That's my
mic drop. Mic drop.
Was that simple?
You guys should drop that mic now. That was really profound.
No, I'm going to forget it. But what did I say?
It's okay. We do have it on record. That will be the highlight.
Sorry,
that will be the highlight.
It's being recorded. Okay. Oh God.
Amy, two things you said in the slightly earlier on.
Yeah.
Which one of them really resonated with me, and the other one is a question. So, when people resign. So how you used to take that personally, and obviously you're in the HR space. So somehow, you are the custodian of everyone working in the company. So if anyone resigns, then it just somehow just comes back to you. It's like, oh shit, like, why are you leaving me?
Yeah. What's happened?
Yeah. What happened?
What could I have done to prevent this?
Exactly. And someone in my position, obviously.
I was just about to say, I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Because obviously someone in my position, I feel the same.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. So it doesn't matter if you're reporting directly to me or not. It's just like, oh my God, like, why'd you resign? Like, and you also touched on social media. You said something about LinkedIn. So you see a lot of posts on LinkedIn, because you did say a lot of interesting things around this. So I'm just trying to summarize it in my head. You see a lot of posts on LinkedIn would say, oh, people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers.
Yes.
But also not.
Also not.
My life situation just changed.
I really agree.
My life situation just changed.
Yeah.
And okay, now it's time for me to move on. The manager was not bad. The company was not bad. My colleagues were not bad. Nothing was bad. I just wanted it was just time to move on, so.
But do you know what that is? That's going back to blame. People like to blame.
Correct.
Then that's where you get that.
Correct.
Toxic.
It's never me. It's just something somehow.
I had a bad manager, therefore I left. And, maybe that was the case and that was the reality. But actually bringing that back to what we were saying earlier, could you replace blame with curiosity?
Yeah.
And say, actually,
that's interesting.
Wasn't the right environment for me. It's time for me to move on, and I'm super excited for my next chapter. Or businesses have gone through so many changes, restructures, change in location, having to prioritize the remote workforce over a workforce based in London, having to make some difficult decisions around numbers of people in teams and having to make difficult choices and cuts. That's not something any business wants to do, but unfortunately has been the reality for so many. Now, sometimes that decision is made for people, and then that sends in another direction. really hard when, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, it's a shock.
Yeah.
It's an overnight shock of, what does this mean for me now? But if you can sort of embrace that as have some time to, feel what you feel in that moment and be cross and be angry. And, you may have been really, really happy in that role and found a company you're really happy to work with and work for. And all of a sudden that decision has been made for you, a business you want to work for years, but actually an external decision or external force has meant that role isn't available anymore and you have to move on to something different. Trying to embrace that as a positive, which is a really hard reframe. I completely understand that. But actually trying to, again, replace that with a bit of curiosity. What does this mean for me?
Correct.
What's this telling me? What direction is this sending me in? And it always works out in the end. But actually, I understand in that moment, it's really, really hard. But what wellbeing strategies and what support can you get from your current employer that you are having to go through that can really support you on that journey? And I think that's a big, another responsibility as part of those redundancy processes, those difficult conversations that a manager or with support from HR should really be guiding and leading on, to try and reframe that as a, dare I say, positive conversation, to say, this is a really tough thing that you're having to go through. What can we do to support you with your next chapter and with supporting you really figure out what it is that you want to do as a result of this happening? And I think that's another kind thing to do to support that person's well-being. They're going through a really, really difficult period, rather than it being a clean break and it being quite black or white. And that will hopefully make the difference for that person. It's going to be something that's a life-changing event when you have to go through something like that, right? So as employers, how can we support that person on an individual level to navigate that difficult period? And still have, they'll still have access to the resources. So for us, having that partnership with you guys at Plum, to still have that external support as well. And I think for some people, they might find that a weird concept because that's something we offer them. But I'm like, no, that's what it's there for. It's to support you through whatever you're going through. So regardless of the fact that this is a benefit through this business, we still want you to use this to support you with what you're going to do next, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I think it's normalizing that and still allowing them and encouraging them to use the resources that we've put in place for them whilst they're with the business. That's still, it's still going to serve them as they sort of move on and transition to their next incredible, amazing opportunity.
I'm going to sound like a broken record because I did say something similar in the previous podcast as well. But the reality is, when you look at services like Plum, the success really, truly depends on the HR, the leadership team, whoever is the evangelist or the champion of the service. Because if you really look at, for example, therapy, you get into a therapy session, you could be speaking to the best therapist on the planet, but if you're not willing to make that change, nothing's going to change. No therapist is going to come and save you. So I think similarly, it comes with the usage of our platform as well. It's really interesting to see how the usage or the uptake or the success is really so much dependent on that actual champion of the product, of that service. So everything that you've said, that mindset is super important as well. If you bring in this service in, why you bring this service in? Like, is it a tick box exercise, or do you really want to help people? Is it beyond City Relay? Anything that you do for your people? I think that's super important for us to really, accountability for ourselves. And then how is that passed on as a narrative to everyone within the organization? Definitely.
And I think it is, bringing it back to that agenda. It was really interesting. I had a conversation yesterday with a partner that's hopefully coming on board with you. And my experience was quite different because my motivation was the wellbeing element. And then luckily you rolled out the HR element, which for me was fantastic because it meant a consolidated platform for our team. It also meant that those that previously hadn't engaged with the wellbeing element had to log in, and it sort of normalized. It was a platform they had to log on to book their leave, and it normalized, the dashboard. You got your time off, you got your wellbeing. It just makes it really more accessible. So it's actually really interesting speaking to this potential partner yesterday, as part of their sort of decision-making process with the platform and what they were going to do, that actually the driver for them was they needed to change an HR platform. And by default, they get the wellbeing element too, which I thought was really cool. So I said, actually, I had a very different experience. But it was really nice speaking to that business with how impressed they were with the HR element, and they got the added cherry on the top with the wellbeing. But what I also said as a bit of guidance is, don't lose that in the fact you're rolling out the HR element. Really make sure you're championing that, because I think sometimes it could be lost because you're rolling out the new HR platform. But it was the other way around for our experience, which I thought was really interesting. It was really nice to, again, see how far you guys have come and how different the platform is now. But actually it reminded me of, and to your point, what's your motivation behind what is that? And for me, the HR element is the cherry on the top, but the real root is the wellbeing element. And for other businesses, it might be the other way around, but ultimately it gives you both sides of things. And I think, again, as I said earlier, it's different for every business. You'll find your strategy with how you pitch it to the company collectively, on an individual level with those you work with, on a team level. And you'll figure out who is quite interested to dip their toe into it and who really isn't, and find your strategy with that. But I really agree with you. I think it needs an internal champion who's going to really keep talking about it internally and keep it high on the agenda. It's very easy to let it go if there's, in the early days, not as much engagement as you'd hoped, just because it's so important to you or the person who's rolled it out, or especially if you're in an HR capacity, it's going to be really high on your agenda. Sometimes it isn't so on maybe other key decision makers or your CEO or whoever you're having to sort of pitch it to. But my advice would be, stick with it and stay true to what you feel is super important to you as a professional, you knowing the team that you work with and what you know they need as well. And don't be afraid if the early days it doesn't take off as quickly as you think it would, because you've got to start somewhere, as we keep saying, and it's not an overnight change. You're not going to get 100% of people booking a session overnight. You'll have a trickle through of people that are super excited to start exploring it. That will then have the next phase of maybe people beginning to talk about it. And over the years, it speaks for itself for sure. But I think it's about just keeping that dialogue open, keeping sharing. You guys are great at sharing content and new things that are going on, and again, making it accessible for people. A lot of people might not want to jump straight into a therapy session, but they might really enjoy a soundscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or doing a course in their own time. You know, there is something for everybody, and it starts somewhere. I think what is a big part of it is sort of normalizing, as I keep saying, this level of support, working past traumas, unhealthy patterns, unhealthy habits. Your reactions to things are for a reason. Like, you react so actually unpacking that can be really helpful to help understand yourself and build that awareness of yourself. But also now you have the coaching element. What I really like is that's a really nice way in for a lot of people, rather than if they don't want to tackle those sort of things and they're not, if that doesn't feel like the right thing for them in that moment. The coaching element is a really positive angle of, again, moving yourself forward, developing yourself, learning, growing, and a really nice way in. It's something I've been talking to a lot of our managers about internally, of giving that a go. And a lot of the work we've been doing as a group, collectively, building on that. We've done a lot of work recently on our individual strengths and using that to encourage collaboration, awareness of each other, awareness what we're good at, and harnessing that. So actually what I really liked from that project is using that as another way in for leadership coaching, to say, I have this as a strength. I'd love to be able to develop this further. Or I was really quite surprised not to have this as a strength in this report and this work I did. I'd love to explore that in more detail with you. So one of the team was quite upset that she didn't have collaboration. And that was, again, that's a really nice opener to say that's, she's a great collaborative person. It just didn't come up on this report, and you can take these reports with a pinch of salt. But for me, I said that's a brilliant opener to say, actually, for growth, how can you be more collaborative? How could you work with somebody objective and utilize Plum to help you develop that or explore that further? Again, it's a nice positive conversation, right? So I've definitely seen quite a nice trend recently of embracing the coaching element and utilizing that to kind of build on some knowledge or some group projects we've done to then all come back together and kind of learn and build on that, which I think is quite a positive one as well, positive angle.
Yeah, that's always been really fundamental to everything that we've done. Like we're cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of stigma when it comes to just the conversation around mental health, So one of the ways to really break that stigma is to how can we bring convenience from every aspect. So, you're looking at the platform and how now the platform is embedded within Microsoft Teams or Slack, or now you've got HR, and then it's not only therapy, but we've got coaching, not only coaching and therapy, but soundscapes. And so one size does not fit all. And how can we bring that convenience? Once you bring that convenience, you're then able to tackle that stigma element as well. I think, so first of all, before I get into the I think and everything else that I want to say, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you, Amy, because, when you ask people for support and help and, testimonials, this is part of business anyway, but you've been great. So thank you so much. I mean, the partner that you spoke about, you not only just speaking to them over a call, but actually visiting them in person. That's just phenomenal. Thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart and everybody else's heart as well. So thank you so much.
No, honestly, don't thank me. Thank you guys for building such an incredible platform that is, building and growing every day. And I think to see the growth in you guys and how that really supports our growth. That's how I've kind of seen this partnership over the years. That I'm so thankful to you guys. And I'm so thankful that we did sign up all those years ago. I think it's our third or maybe even fourth renewal. Third or fourth. We're just going through the renewal process now. And we have 3 sessions left between now and the end of our renewal, which is November 16th. So I did make an announcement on that. I said, guys, snap them up. We got 3 left. But we did go through a period, I think, in our second renewal where we used them 6 months in. So that was a really big uptake on them, and now I think it's much more, like I said, we've got the right number of sessions for the year. But that's another thing, if you are thinking about, or you either have already partnered with Plum or thinking about it, different trends. And I think you guys are great. You offer that flexibility, but you'll notice year on year and do monitor the usage. Obviously, everything is confidential, but what you can see is how many sessions have been used and checking that monthly, quarterly, seeing sense checking kind of where things are. And I think that gives you a bit of an idea of collectively where things are at. So that year specifically, I was so happy that it was being utilized, but we'd all of a sudden used our 40 sessions within 6 months of our renewal contract. So do monitor that as well and kind of use that as a bit of a sense check of kind of where internally things are at, and maybe use that as a bit of a barometer for maybe putting some additional things in, or doing some more one-to-one sessions with people to then check in so they've got another angle of support as well as the platform. Again, you will know your people, you know your business, you'll know what will work. But ultimately, I think the goal is creating success for yourself, your department, your people, and the business, and utilizing these resources to champion that and support you through that. However big your HR team is, you need a partner that you can lean on, rely on, and other people can do that as well. And I think it's so important to really pitch for that as well. I think from my experience with businesses going through difficult times, what's the easiest thing to make a cut on? It's anything that's not tangible, like well-being, which is sad. That's really tough because actually from where I'm sat, that's the number one thing that you don't cut on. Once you've had it, you don't take that away. So I would say another bit of advice from my end is fight for that, fight for that budget if you are in an environment. And a lot of startups and scale-ups, that is a continual dialogue. Where can we fine-tune that cost? Where can we accelerate our growth? What changes do we need to make to get to where we need to get to? So stay true to what works and what you need as a professional, as a team, as a department, as an individual, and be creative in other areas. That's probably my advice. Don't cut the well-being.
It's interesting. Few things we do in an organization from a strategic perspective becomes the foundation or the building block. And I think when you have initiatives like this and you vocalize it to your team saying, okay, we acknowledge and prioritize and trying to destigmatize the whole conversation on mental health, and we're telling you that we're aware and we want to be supportive of your mental health and provide that space within the organization. And if you take that away, then I think you're doing more good than harm. It would have been better if you never started. This is just my opinion, because now you've built that foundation and now you've taken it away. So it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, I agree.
So so then you're sending another message that, that was just a tick box exercise at that point in time.
Done it now and then.
And so now you're setting that as a precedent. So tomorrow when you do something, now that trust element also gets impacted. Again, just before this, you said something, and it's quite interesting, which links into this conversation, where we spoke about COVID, and you said there's a lot of changes going on in COVID, and it was just day to another, and now there's like an aftermath of COVID. It's interesting to hear that from you, Amy, because my reality, so your reality versus mine, it'll be good to have that conversation. So my reality now is that, okay, because primarily we were only mental health, and now we've expanded into the whole HR space. And initially COVID, we don't know what to do, and we just need help, and bam, the conversation around mental health just exploded, and services like Plum, again, we all saw exponential growth. But now that human beings have a short-term memory, COVID is long and gone, and now we have another problem to think about. So that need, somehow it feels to me that is no longer there. But it's interesting that you say that, perhaps maybe, and again, I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but just your experience. Now you're saying that there's an aftermath. So a lot of realization, which was maybe not there at that time, has come to fruition today on an individual level, not company. So people are feeling it even more now. So it's interesting because when you look at, from my reality, when I look at on a company level, the need was that at that time, COVID is gone. We're back to normal lives. So why do we invest in things like this?
I think it sort of loops back with this past trauma that we spoke about that was a traumatic time for the world, right? It was full of uncertainty. It was full of worry. It was full of anxiety for what this meant for us individually, but also for the world in as a whole. And I think we sort of touched on it earlier when we first started chatting, this sort of control element. As human beings, we want to feel in control of our lives, what we're doing, our choices, our options. And that was completely taken from every single person, like globally. And that was a decision that was made for us, right? For our safety, for the safety of our loved ones. That is going to have some sort of knock-on impact. When in a world that is full of so much choice, so many options, you can do anything whenever you want, right? That's the world we live in. There is something for anyone or to do anything. So actually, to not be able to do any of that, there has to be some sort of knock-on impact there emotionally for people. And I think, yes, as humans, we are resilient, we bounce back. And like you said, cool, we're back to normal. what is normal? What is the new norm? And the weird thing was we did bounce, like things did. They actually did. But that almost made it harder, I think, because there was no there was a bit of an intermediary time. But
transition.
Not really. It sort of did go from 0 to 100. Yeah. And if you go from 0 to 100, again, there's no period to really adapt to it. And you're kind of going, and I think actually now I think about it, is people trying to go back to what was and what their old lives, but actually, again, what we were saying at the beginning of this call, figuring out actually what they need now. So going back to 5 days in the office when that was a previous norm isn't the case now, but yet trying to go back to all these social commitments and the way the fast-paced, that life is fast-paced, but we went from having fast-paced options, doing whatever we wanted, traveling, to not being able to do that, then going straight back to it. What was the bit in the middle? So I think there is an aftermath of, we were so excited to go back to the choices, the options, the busyness. This is from my experience anyway, actually now trying to find our feet with what worked in that period, weirdly, that was forced upon us, what didn't, and what you do need back in your life, and then finding that rebalance. And I really do think it's the case for all, every generation, whatever generation, whatever age you were when, that all happened, everyone is sort of finding their feet with it. Like even my mum said recently, within her friendship group, she's noticed a lot more kind of worry and anxiety around doing certain things, where to go to do this, and that she didn't really notice before. So actually, I thought perhaps it's just certain age groups get really impacted. But actually, I do think across the board, it has triggered, maybe someone that wasn't anxious before has all of a sudden, as a result of this, realized that there is some anxious tendencies. Because if being in control and having options, being able to make your own decisions, which are all very normal things within our life to be able to not be able to do, that's going to induce some anxiety, isn't it? Because you can't do it anymore. So what does that mean? So I think it is maybe dealing with that, accepting that did happen, or accepting the past, and then kind of moving on positively in the way that you want and that feels right to you. And that is going to be different for everybody. But I think that's part of figuring it out on an individual level. And as I keep saying, what works for one doesn't work for another. And sort of navigating that and knowing that that's okay and that's fine too. And that it is a bit of a journey, and kind of getting as much support as you can to kind of navigate that change. But I mean, we're coming to 2025, right? In January. So that's nearly that would be 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
It's a long time. But 2 to 3 years of that. So we've really only been like 2 years post it, if you think about it.
Correct.
Maybe this has been an adjustment period.
Yeah.
Maybe come 2025 things will, I don't know. I like fives, like those numbers. Maybe the next 5 years or the next decade. I don't know. You just don't know. But maybe that's another thing. No one could have predicted it. Actually, I think I read someone, it was like in a book or something, you get these books that predict the future. But no one could have predicted that. That was completely... So actually, I can understand why that might provoke a lot of anxiety, and a lot of people would say, well, if that could happen, what else could happen?
Yeah.
We do live in... So, and again, I think hopefully that has encouraged people to kind of explore different angles of support and to help navigate life's challenges. I think that's probably a nice way of putting it, because life can be challenging. Life does throw us curveballs, and sometimes you need a bit of support to navigate those,
Really interesting conversation. I think, Amy, the one thing that I want to try and pick out from this for everyone listening is the biggest thing that my takeaway is communication. Because we spoke about from leadership to one-to-one, change management, everything really boils down to communication. What would you, if you were to, give your one tip for organizations or people in the HR department to be able to apply today, what would that be? Because, and I think it's also interesting, you did touch on, all these elements, but it's also not easy. We know, for the most part, you want to, open communication and the things that you're supposed to do, but it's not easy on both HR, leadership team, and the individual. So what's your one advice?
So I feel if I could summarize my advice in a few words, i.e. simplifying it, I think it would be creating an environment where people can thrive, not survive. And creating an environment where they're able to sort of transcend that boundary. I think it's quite easy to stay in that survival mode as humans, busy life, lots going on. And I think maybe it's easy for people to not acknowledge they're in survival mode. And I think maybe building an awareness around how to move out of that space. And it's not really normal to be in that. I'm not saying it's not normal, but it's not maybe an ideal optimal environment to be in that survival space. So what do you need as an individual to be in that thriving space and move forward with your life in a positive way? My one caveat to that, now I've said it, is also to not put too much pressure on yourself either. Like sometimes it is okay to just be surviving and just sort of staying ahead of water and doing what you can. Like I think I'm somebody that puts a lot of pressure on myself. So I'm sure people will resonate with that. And there's many of us out there that are the same. So I think I've definitely learned, to also be mindful of that and not constantly be pushing myself. But equally, I think it's something I've learned and reflected on is that is a big part of who I am and my personality. So maybe that is okay too. But it's also, I think, finding, like with anything in life, finding that fine balance of when it is serving you to kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone. This is a great example of this. Coming here today, doing this podcast, here I am today. It's not something that is out of my comfort zone for sure. I've never done a podcast before, but that's probably a positive example of putting myself in a situation that, it's a little bit out there for me, but something I think is a positive example, like doing something a little bit different, and encouraging myself to do that. But then it's, I think, not putting too much pressure on other areas, and it's okay not to do something if you don't want to, or that doesn't feel like the right thing to do, or I might revisit that in a year's time. So there's always a caveat, I think. But I think hopefully getting to know yourself a bit more and building that awareness so you know what will or won't serve you in that respect. I think another thing I would say on that piece is, really understanding what's important to you as an individual, as a person. And I think that can be quite hard to define. I think we know what we value and what's important to us, but actually when you're confronted with someone like asking you, I don't know, what would you say? So I've done an activity with a few of the team internally that I just came across this values test online that sort of, gets to test your commitment with you. Pick words that really stand out to you, and then it sort of tests your commitment with each word. And I think if you did this test maybe each quarter, each year, you'd probably get a different answer, which I actually quite like, because I think it's quite reflective of kind of where you're at in that moment. And I think it helps you prioritize, if anything. But what was really interesting that came out for me, which are quite interesting, were growth and meaningful work. Now, I'm not surprised by that, but it was actually quite nice sort of seeing that right in front of me. And I think that made me realize I do need to be prioritizing areas of growth. Hence today is an example of that. So pushing myself kind of does serve me in that area, because obviously that's important to me right now in my life. And meaningful work. Similar principle, right? I know this work means a lot to me, and actually doing this podcast by default, hopefully people will resonate with a lot of what we've been talking about, what we've said. But another way of doing that sort of activity, yes, you can use an online resource, or actually just sit down and think about, say, 5 words that really resonate or are important to you in this moment. But a friend of mine actually did a different angle, which I really, really liked. At the beginning of this year, she picked a word that she wanted to kind of live by in the year of 2024. Again, super simple concept. And just having that one word I think really helped, so I said, bring it back to what was important to her at the beginning of the year, and then really nicely using it as a reflective tool towards the end of the year. So she picked presents. So for her, something really important this year was to be really present in everything that she was doing. I picked brave for mine. So again, this is another example of me being brave and coming to this podcast and see you guys today. But that's also a really simple, quite nice way of doing it as well. And it doesn't have to be done at the beginning of the year, FYI. You could do it at the beginning of each month. As we said at the beginning of this, start now. Don't feel you've got to wait till January. You've got to wait. No. Start now. You might find it quite nice to pick a word a day. That might be a bit too intense for some people. So just find what works for you. But I think by having that one word or that collective group of words, I think brings it back to what's important to you on an individual level. And then maybe sharing that. I shared that with you, and hopefully everyone listening, that might really help you make a difficult decision, or might make a decision so much easier, because it brings it back to the basics of what you want, which for some reason is quite hard to do, isn't it? So, and again, to sort of summarize that piece, really promotes our own well-being and brings that decision making back into our control, our domain, and on our terms, which is something, we have had limitations in over the last few years. So I think it's about bringing elements of ourselves back into how we're living our lives. Maybe we could look at it that way as
well. Amy, I must say you've been an absolute star. I don't know if you know, but Plum's purpose is to help people thrive. So there's just even before recording this podcast, there was a lot of things that I would resonate with you. We spoke about Dubai, we spoke about so many other things. Yeah. But it's just so interesting that so I think Amy, fundamentally, it's really important for us to, and I think even before the recording, we spoke about paying it forward and that ripple effect. And the one thing that I can take away from this conversation really is how you truly focus on that ripple effect and paying it forward, and everything that you've spoken about now in the role that you do, and even off the cuff, the different conversations we've had. And I think that's just so beautiful, because that one element does have the ability to change not only that person's life, but to have that ripple effect and impact the entire world. So thank you so much for doing what you do and continue doing what you do. Thank you so much for supporting us. Thank you so much for, being the evangelist that you are, and championing not just well-being, but all the good stuff, all the other stuff that you're doing in your organization as well. And thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for sticking to your word, brave. Yes. This is really brave. So, and it's also really awkward for me. There's a light here, there's a camera there, and there's just too many things happening. But fantastic.
Well, thank you for making me feel so at ease. To finalize, I'm going to put you on the spot with a word. What do you think you'd pick for your word?
The
beginning of September. I love September. You start.
I promise you, whilst you were talking about that, and I was like, oh my God, I want to pick a word as well. I think if I were to pick a word, and I think maybe that word would be till the end of the year, and I think that word would be to be more grateful. Gratitude.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Gratitude. Yeah.
And I think it is so easy to not be.
Yeah.
Because there's always more that we want, we could be doing. So I think that's such a really great choice of words. And I think something you can bring into every day. I always say, there's always something to be grateful for every single day. Even if it's something super small, like you've not had the best of days, there's great in every day. And I think actually for those that haven't kind of explored this gratitude and this sort of angle, I have read it does begin to rewire your brain and your neural pathways, because it's so easy to spot what we don't have or lack, or what we're striving to have, whatever that is. But actually, it's so easy to overlook what is right in front of us. And actually, the more we build awareness around that, and it can be as simple as, I'm so grateful I had time to have a cup of coffee this morning, or I'm so grateful I had time to walk around the block at lunchtime. Like, these are again, it's the small things and the big things. But I think that's also another really nice technique you can do on an individual level, or you can share with others to do. But I think, again, this consistency piece, it's easy to say, I'll do it for a day. Try and do it and try and write it down, 3 things every day that you are grateful for, and begin to see the changes. Because the more, again, the more you are grateful for, the more it's weird.
Correct.
And I know it sounds like quite for some people might be a bit of a concept. Honestly, it's weird. Like there's something that just shifts your brain and you just see things
I agree.
in a completely different light. So I think that is a great choice of word.
Can I also just tell you something now? And again, whilst you were talking, and it's off the back of this entire conversation, I'm going to double down on that word.
Yeah.
So not just being grateful for the things that are going right in my life, but also for the things that aren't.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important, because we did also touch on, how we always celebrate success, but the success really is a byproduct of failure. We spoke about, normalizing failure, because only when you fail are you able to learn. Only off the back of those learnings are you able to grow, and then you finally succeed. So really having that, and we spoke about perspective as well. So having that perspective around things that are not going your way is only but an opportunity to learn from. And then you can grow and then finally succeed. So being grateful for things that are going right in my life and for things that are not.
I think that's a really nice angle. And I think as well, that brings an element of vulnerability as well. Things don't always go the way we want them to go. That is the reality of life. But actually embracing that, and as you said, switching that to be grateful for that, I think is so powerful. And I think it teaches you, to be grateful for anything that comes your way. However, always a caveat, sometimes things are just annoying.
Yeah, I love that.
Sometimes it's like, okay, I can't be grateful for everything. And that's okay too. We're not telling you to be grateful for absolutely. But again, having an awareness around that, and also it being okay if you really don't feel grateful if something didn't go your way for 5 minutes, and you can feel annoyed and cross. But actually then a couple of days, a week, couple of months, however much time you need, then you can begin to say, actually, okay, I understand why this sent me, or what have I learned from this, or how do I rebuild from this, or what direction do I want to go in as a result of that really annoying thing happen. But I think acknowledge, I think it's quite easy. I think I've always been someone to power on and get on, and actually sometimes it is okay to just be annoyed. I think I'm naturally quite a positive person, so I'm like, oh, that happened because, and actually sometimes that's really annoying.
Yeah.
I'm really annoyed that happened, and I just need to sit with that annoyance rather than immediately try and find a solution as to why. So always a caveat, but exception to the rule almost. I think the gratitude thing is, great choice of word.
Thank you so much, Amy. I've taken so much from this. Insightful and valuable. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this also resonate and feel the way I feel. However, I did get a little bit more from this conversation than perhaps the listeners, because you also helped me with a lot of bits and bobs on product development. So a few things, whilst again you were talking, I'm like, oh shit, we can apply this, we can apply that. I mean, it obviously has to be a secret. I can't say anything on the show now.
I was wondering what you were going to say there. I was like, what have I said
on the show now? That. But as soon as we end this, I will share that with you as well. And it'll be nice to get your 2 cents on that anyway. So
definitely,
So thank you so much, Amy.
Amazing.
This was brilliant. I'm glad we did this. Hopefully, we see you very soon again.
Yes.
I wish we did this earlier, but I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you chose once again that word brave, which allowed us to have this beautiful conversation. So,
and hopefully that can be a takeaway. Anyone listening, pick your word now.
Yes.
And like I said, because of that word, I think it did encourage me to step out of my comfort zone and do something like this. So I hope that's an example of, like I said, how just one word you pick from a conversation I had with my friend at the beginning of the year has had, I guess, a positive impact. Pick your word. And thank you again so much for having me. It's been amazing to chat through, and I'm super excited to see what was happening in your brain throughout that conversation. I didn't expect that. So here we go. We've got so much more to expect from Plum, and all the exciting things you've got in the pipeline as well for the tech, which is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy.